So this week I put up two new debates. I had a debate with my friend Ovadia Avrami, and he has a very interesting position. Not one that I hold. I mean, if you guys hear the discussion, although the guy is very intelligent, it's kind of the old position of the two-house doctrine. Now, if there's any Jews listening, you guys probably don't know what I'm talking about, but Christians, or at least Messianic or Hebrew rooters, do. So the two-house doctrine teaches that how do you explain the great influx of Gentiles wanting to convert to Judaism? It can't be that they just found Torah appealing. No, there's got to be something metaphysical about it. So their response is that all the lost tribes are going to be gathered in again, i.e. the ingathering. This is what you see happening. The tribes are coming back, the 10 lost tribes that were exiled by Sanherib, by the Assyrian general, dispersed across the Assyrian Empire. Thought to be lost? No. Every Gentile you see wanting to convert to Judaism, according to this understanding, is, I guess one can say, a reincarnation of a member of one of those tribes. Or just a descendant, a genetic descendant of someone of those tribes coming back somehow. Now, there's a few ethical problems with this notion. One, the way I think that we could all relate to it is with a phenomenon called Bnei Anusim, the Moranos, the forced ones, i.e. forced to convert in Spain 500 years ago. Now, I live in South Florida. The vast majority of Latinos who want to convert to Judaism, and my family's from Colombia, at least the vast majority that I have met, claim to have an ancient Jewish pedigree. They claim to be one of the descendants of the Moranos. They claim to be Bnei Anusim, the children of those who were forcibly converted. Now, I've lived other places, not just South Florida, and this is not the case just because there aren't so many Hispanics in places like Virginia and in Denver who wanted to convert to Judaism. But in particular, South Florida is full of people who identify as Bnei Anusim, which is really the same, slightly the same idea. The notion that we should treat people special, that we should give people special treatment just because they claim to have an ancient Jewish pedigree. Now, of course, they can't prove this. And if they can prove it, think about it. The expulsion from Spain occurred in 1492. You're talking about over 500, almost 600 years from now. How can anyone trace any sort of lineage back? And don't forget, there's a mother and a father. So it's not just saying that my name is Perez or Rodriguez or Torres, all these names that have ancient Jewish Castilian roots to them, but they also have to account for the lineage of their mother. So it's really hard to make that claim. The ideology still aligned. It's still a similar ideology saying that we should treat people who claim to have a special lineage, a special pedigree, different than someone who happens to just come to Judaism with a hunger, with an interest to learn because they find Torah ethical, purposeful, inspirational. Those people should get to the back of the line. But someone who claims to have some special pedigree, they get special treatment. And another thing you guys probably didn't know about Bnei Anusim, not just an Anus in general, but someone who claims to have descendants from Spain who were forcibly converted, i.e. qualifying them for the title of Anus. Well, the truth is that Jews in Spain weren't forcibly converted and thus wouldn't qualify for that title to begin with. No, friends, in Spain, Jews were told to either convert or leave. And those who left remained Jewish, and those who stayed either became full Christians or many times practiced Judaism in secret. But technically, there wasn't any coercion. No one was forced to do anything, which really wouldn't qualify them for what they claim to have. And that's some guarded status because of onus rahmana patre, that someone whose force is not liable. That, as they teach, the Rambam allowed them or people like them to have. And the truth is that this is not what the Rambam said. Now, it is true that the Rambam gave an allowance. He wrote a letter to the Jews, not just living in Yemen, but living all over the Arab world who were being conquered by, at that time, the Almohads, who were forcibly converting people to Islam. There, for sure, it was convert or die. And the Rambam's understanding in terms of Islam, the way he held, was that someone who converted to Islam did not negate their existence as a Jew or an Israelite, because Islam, as he saw it, wasn't an idolatrous religion. Now, as a matter of fact, he wrote this as almost a response to another letter that a rabbi wrote who said that, yes, you should give up your life instead of converting to Islam because Islam was idolatry. As a matter of fact, Islam, the consensus at the time, if there was ever a consensus of this, was that it was an idolatrous religion, and the Rambam stepped out and said that it wasn't. He was really a dat yachid, a lone voice in this. But regardless, the Rambam held that Christianity was idolatry, which would make his heter of allowing conversion not applicable in regards to the Moranos or the conversos from Spain. And as a matter of fact, this is why we have smicha today, the ceremonial smicha, because many of those Jews who accepted Christianity and were then later chased out of Spain because they were uncovered to be insincere or fake Christians, were pushing for the rabbinate to create a new Sanhedrin. Why? Because the understanding back then was that anyone who converted to Christianity was chayev kares. He was liable to be cut off from the Jewish people. And there is an opinion by Chazal, one way to eliminate kares, or the label in one's life, was through malchus, lashes. And the only ones allowed to give lashes were the Sanhedrin, which was abolished in around the 4th century of the Common Era. But this need, this desire, reached the ears of the Mari Bey Rav, Rabbi Yaakov Bey Rav in Tzfat, who, under the Rambam Svora, tried to reestablish a Sanhedrin, but failed to do so, at least according to the understanding of the Rambam, because the vast majority of Chachamim weren't on board. But they did end up creating this ceremonial smicha that we have nowadays, but no Sanhedrin. So technically the Bnei Anusim, aka the Moranos, are not actually Anusim. Now, regarding Anusim being accepted into the Jewish community, they currently are still made to convert. I mean, no one really buys this whole notion that because I think my ancestors are Jewish because I'm from Spain, that I should just be let in. However, they typically insist on not calling it a conversion, but just teshuvah, like just returning to their people, which makes the rabbis not say any brachas during their conversions because of suffix bracha lakula, that if there's any doubt that one should say a bracha, you don't say it. And this would apply during their immersion. But I've actually met people who refuse to convert because they insist that they're Jewish. Yeah. But anyways, I don't have to tell you why I have a problem with this idea. One, because we're telling the world that we elevate blood over ethics. And for some reason, this doesn't bother people. Two, I don't see the sentiment mentioned in Torah that people should be treated better just because of who their parents happen to be. Now, I acknowledge that we have certain offices in Torah. To be a Cohen, you have to ultimately be from the tribe of Levi through Aaron. Okay, that's not necessarily special treatment. That's what the office requires. Now, if you're a Cohen who was Mechalel Shabbat, who publicly worshipped idols, who behaved unbecoming of a decent individual, you would lose the ability to fill the role of a Cohen. But to the extent that your children could be what's called halal or mechalel, they could lose the kahuna. So only because someone has a prestigious title doesn't necessarily mean that that person is intrinsically special or prestigious themselves. It's all what you do with it. There's a story in the Talmud that one of the two greatest sages, for sure in the time of the Zugot, Shemaiah Ve'Avtalion, two of the heads of the Jewish people who happened to be converts themselves. And the story goes that the high priest was walking down the road and he was surrounded by students and scholars, right? I mean, they wanted to roll with the high priest, and they see down the road that two converts, Shemaiah and Avtalion, were also walking their way. Out of respect for the greatness of these two individuals, they left the high priest. Now think about it. The high priest is a central figure of any particular Jewish civilization at that time. It's always been the high priest. They leave him to go meet two converts who happen to be great themselves. I mean, they were judges, teaching us that there's no such thing as intrinsic holiness or anyone who's intrinsically special. The reason Shemaiah and Avtalion were elevated is because they worked hard to get where they were at. Now, a high priest could be a scholar, and a high priest could be an ignoramus. Only because someone's a Cohen doesn't mean that he deserves special treatment. Now, yes, we do have a command to take care of the high priest because they're the ones representing the Jewish people. But that doesn't mean that the high priest is in some way intrinsically special on its own. The office is special, but everyone has to work hard to reach the greatest heights that we're able to reach. And this is one problem I have with this whole two-house, B'nai Anusim, Kol HaTorah movement. Now, Kol HaTorah, the reason I mention it is because that's one of the main books that people use to justify eschatological notions, the end of days, and how the ingathering of the exiles plays a part in that. Now, you guys probably have never heard of Kol HaTorah before. Kol HaTorah is a book that was found, I think, right after the Six-Day War. It claims to be the ideas of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon. Those who follow Kol HaTorah don't claim he wrote it, but his student, Hillel Rivlin, claims to have written it. And it was found or revealed, like I said, I believe in 1968 by the Rivlin family in Israel. And it was full of concepts that justify religious Zionism. And that's one reason that the Haredi community never adopted it. I mean, really, how can you find a book around 45 years, 50 years ago, claiming to be basically the words and the ideas of the Vilna Gaon? That's the root of pseudepigrapha. So pseudepigrapha is when someone tries to get their work accepted by claiming that it was written by somebody else. And this happens a lot in the Jewish world, from Sefer HaBahir, the Zohar, basically every medrash. The vast majority of midrashim, I would say around 90% of them, were written actually in the Middle Ages. However, they still have the name of Tanaim on them. And there's an idea like this. It's brought down by the Magen Avram. And he was attacked for writing this, that if someone wants to get their ideas taken seriously, just put someone else's name on it. And you know what? It works. As despicable as that sounds, to basically take someone's name to get your ideas socially canonized by the Jewish people, it works. Heck, I mean, someone should really try this in the Jewish world. I mean, write a book and say that it was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses, and just, I don't know, like drop it off in a store in Mea Shearim. Wait 2 years, and I would bet that there'll be 3, 4, 5 new Hasidic movements based on this book's ideas. Because people don't question, people don't challenge. It shows how hungry people are for change or something new, because the Torah to many people is boring. It's the same old message, right? They need a special jolt. So this is why they run to all these different books that take them on a mystical joyride. It's really because of affluence and boredom. The Jewish people really currently have no purpose in this world. I mean, what do they do? Now, the Jewish people did have a purpose, and that was proselytizing. Jews used to proselytize. All the major historians, Salo Baron, even writes that 10% of the Roman Empire was Jewish because of Jewish proselytizing. They would encourage Gentiles not to keep 7 laws. This never existed, this whole notion of encouraging Gentiles to keep 7 laws. It was because they were encouraging full conversion to Judaism. That's it. But then Emperor Hadrian got involved, and he made it a capital offense to seek converts and a capital offense to convert to Judaism. So the Jews stopped seeking converts. And because of that, till now, well, not to mention that in the Islamic world and the Christian world, it was also illegal to proselytize. Jews, now in this time of affluence that we happen to live in, feel that Jews have never encouraged anyone to become Jewish. And this is why they've turned inward. That's where all these mystical pursuits ultimately lead. And I think the Torah is telling you a different message. It's telling you to look outside of yourself, to look at the planet as a whole. I mean, we have to share the world with people who happen to not be Jewish. Don't you think that if we fail to impact them, they're eventually going to impact us? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. You either impact the world or the world will impact you. It's clearly a numbers game. I mean, Jews are big on marketing. They know how to sell a product. But for some reason, when it comes to Judaism, they fail to preach what they practice. Now, I don't want to speak for all Jews. I mean, there are many Jews who do proselytize. Many of them that I've interviewed. They're just not very vocal about it. I want to encourage you guys that if you know anyone in your life who happens not to be Jewish, and you just think to yourself like, wow, what a great candidate this person would make. What an asset he would be to the Jewish people. Tell him about it. Invite him to shul, invite him for Shabbos. You'd be surprised.